Good morning, everyone. My name is Connor, and I am one of the pastors here. And if for whatever reason I have never introduced myself to you, you can be a guest, you could have come here before. But if I have not said hello, my name is Connor to you, please find me after the service. I would love to get to know you, take you out for coffee, whatever. Would love to get to know you and hear about your faith. I hope y'all's summer has been going well. Mine has for sure. It's been a little busy. Me and my wife, we closed on our first house ever, so that was an experience, and we've been unboxing things. So not really a vacation, but I hope that y'all's summer has been going really well. And one thing I think is awesome is that in this season of rest, where life sort of slows down and we take it at a different pace, I think it's awesome that we still make time for the things that matter, like gathering together to worship together, not taking a break in our faith, but using this time to deepen it and refine it instead. Today we start the second part of a larger sermon series we've been in, talking about questions. Not questions that we ask to God or questions that we ask about God, but questions that Jesus poses directly to us in the Gospels. Tough questions. Like why can't you see the log in your own eye? Why are you judging people when you have problems of your own? Do you even love me? And if you do, then this is what your life should be looking like. Jesus asks us these tough questions because we probably wouldn't ask them of ourselves on our own. And that might be because we don't want to look at ourselves in the mirror. We wouldn't like the answer we would give to a question, and it would just make us uncomfortable, so we avoid it. And today's question is no different. It's a tough one to look at, to sit on. But I promise you, if you sit on this question for just a little bit this morning, maybe God will do something with it. So our scripture reading for today comes from Mark chapter 10, verses 35 through 40, and then we're going to jump ahead to verses 46 through 52. If you didn't bring a Bible with you, we have some printed copies right back there in the corner of the sound booth. Bible apps on your phone are 100% acceptable. Oftentimes they'll show you like full context, the meaning behind a passage. We'll have the verse up on the screen, or the worst option, you can just listen to me read it. So here it is. Mark chapter 10, 35 through 40, and then 46 through 52. And it says, James and John, Zebedee's sons, came to Jesus and said, "Teacher, we want you to do for us whatever we ask." "What do you want me to do for you?" he asked. They said, "Allow one of us to sit on your right and the other on your left when you enter your glory." Jesus replied, "You don't know what you're asking. Can you drink the cup I drink or receive the baptism I receive?" "We can," they answered. Jesus said, "You will drink the cup I drink and receive the baptism I receive. But to sit at my right or left is not mine to give. It belongs to those for whom it has been prepared." And skipping ahead to verse 46, it then goes on to say, Jesus and his followers came into Jericho. As Jesus was leaving Jericho together with his disciples and a sizable crowd, a blind beggar named Bartimaeus, Timaeus' son, was sitting beside the road. When he heard that Jesus of Nazareth was there, he began to shout, "Jesus, Son of David, show me mercy." Many scolded him, telling him to be quiet, but he shouted even louder, "Son of David, show me mercy." Jesus stopped and said, "Call him forward." They called the blind man. "Be encouraged, get up, he's calling you." And throwing his coat to the side, he jumped up and came to Jesus. And Jesus asked him, "What do you want me to do for you?" And the blind man said, "Teacher, I want to see." And Jesus said, "Go. Your faith has healed you." And at once he was able to see, and he began to follow Jesus on the way. Two stories, one question, two completely different endings. Now, right before these passages, Jesus and his disciples, they're on their way to Jerusalem. And for the third time in Mark's gospel, he tells his disciples that he's going to suffer and die soon, but then be resurrected after 3 days. And the disciples hear that, but they don't really get it. They know that trouble is coming. They know that people hate Jesus, and they want him out of the picture, but maybe they think he's just being dramatic, or he's being metaphorical or symbolic. Maybe they think that, okay, yeah, there will be a fight, but we believe that Jesus will win, he'll overcome their enemies, and his kingdom will win out at the end of the day. And so then they start thinking, well, what will happen after that? And so James and John, they approached Jesus one day with just a wildly blunt request. We want you to do for us whatever we ask. They're asking Jesus for a blank check. Bold. And Jesus for sure knows where they're heading with this, but he goes along by asking them a question. What do you want me to do for you? Now, one basic thing about the Bible is that whenever two things are repeated in close order together, the same thing, pay attention, because God is trying to tell you something. And so when Jesus says, what do you want me to do for you? He's pointing directly to you. And he's asking you to look at yourself in the mirror, and he's asking, who are you? What do you want? What are you after? And having been asked that question, they give their honest truth, their honest answer about what they want Jesus to do. Now, these are ordinary guys. It was normal people that Jesus was talking to. It was with people just like you and me that he chose to set out and to change the world. And like us, they can get a little, ambitious, all about that hustle. They want to work. And in their minds, when their guy had won and his victory was complete, when their teacher was in his glory and his kingdom, they wanted to be Jesus' right-hand dudes, his boys, basically. They wanted to be elevated above everyone else, to have more authority, more importance than everyone. And notice how they casually don't mention the other disciples in this request. They leave them out. And that's going to cause some friction later on in the book. It would be like if, when I was a kid, I went up to my parents and I said, "Oh, glorious mother and father," I'm looking up because I'm a kid in this scenario, "put me at your right hand above my other siblings, for I have been loyal and faithful to you. May I be the one to divvy out who takes out the trash and who will get to ride shotgun in perpetuity." It'd be like that. And my siblings, rightfully so, would proceed to put cooking oil in my sunscreen as an act of revenge. True story. That happened in my family. We'll talk about it later. Probably not. Now, it might not have been that silly, but maybe James and John thought they deserved this, that they will have earned it by sticking by Jesus through thick and thin. But whatever the reason, I think they asked this request because what they were after was significance, being better or above or more well off than everyone, being noticeable. And so what they're asking Jesus is basically to meet a want that's earthly because they want to be more important than others here on earth. And don't get me wrong, Jesus, he sees their passion for God's kingdom, and he knows that they're willing to face persecution and rejection for him, and they're down to go through that because they love their teacher so much. But their heart for the end goal, for what they'll get in return, is just a little off. And they want their God to make them significant among people. Now, there probably aren't many of us that go, day in and day out, just straight up praying to God, asking that He makes us higher on the totem pole, either at work or our family or our HOA. I don't know if anybody wants to be in charge of their HOA. No offense to HOA. It's great. Um, and and don't get me wrong, there have been times when we like that feeling of attention. We all want to be the guy. There have been times when, if I'm being honest, when I've gotten up here and instead of me asking God, God, I hope that you speak something through me, I've just said to myself, man, God, I hope I look good doing this. I hope I look admirable or like a good person. There have been times when I've been in a social setting and instead of thinking about how I can listen to someone or how I can be a good friend to someone in a conversation, I've just thought, man, I hope I'm really funny and likable in that conversation. And it feels nice when we get that attention for a little while. But eventually, that high, that feeling of worth and significance, that feeling of getting approval, that currency that's worth a lot by worldly standards, one day, it can just not be there. And you don't have the attention that you used to get from your friends or your family or your coworkers, people important to you. And when the day comes when you no longer have the spotlight you used to, maybe you try to find something else that you can do, or someone else you can be, something you can have, and maybe you just wish that God would make you more important for your peers. But Jesus tells us that that's not mine to give you. That may be what you want from me, but that's not what I came to do for you. If you're looking for significance among people, then you're following the wrong guy, because that's not what I came to do for you. He didn't come to improve our lot by worldly standards. James and John, they just couldn't see that. And a lot of times we can't see that too. But there's another story about another guy who's struggling with that same thing, that same insecurity, insignificance. We're told that there was a blind beggar in Jericho during this time, and his name was Bartimaeus. We don't know much about him, only that he's been blind for a very long time. Unfortunately for him, the time and place he lived had a very negative view of the paralytics, the deaf, the mute, and the blind. It was thought that the people with those afflictions, they must have messed up big with them and God. They must have either done something terrible to deserve it, or their parents did some awful sin, and so now the kids are having to pay the price for it. That's what was thought of paralytics, the blind, the mute, and the deaf, people like Bartimaeus. And so Bartimaeus had been told his whole life that he was insignificant, unclean, unworthy to ever want or get anything good. He'd been told his whole life, no, you can't ask for that, Bartimaeus. No, the holy priests don't have time for you. Be quiet. Save your breath. Have you ever been there? Have you ever felt insignificant? Like you didn't matter? Like nobody cared? Have you ever felt small? In life, we go through so many things that can give us that feeling. Getting fired or laid off from a job. Not being able to provide for your family in a time of need. Not being strong enough to protect the ones that you love, to protect them from harm's way. And when we feel insignificant, after a while at least, and when we try to fix it with things of this world, we realize that there's a void deep inside our hearts. And there's nothing in this world that can fill it. We don't have an earthly want for something, but we have a deep longing need in our souls, for something to fix that, to fill that God-shaped hole in our hearts. Have you ever been in that cold, isolating place of insignificance? And so to survive, Bartimaeus, with no eyes, with no vision, he would beg in the streets in order to survive. Didn't have his sight, but he had his hearing, and he would have grown accustomed to the footsteps and the traffic of the street. And as he would hear footsteps go by, he would hope and pray for someone to give him just a tiny morsel of bread, or just a small bit of water, or some discarded, dirty piece of clothing for him to wear. He was completely helpless and in need of others for protection and provision. But one day, something's different. The sound of footsteps, it's louder. It's like there are more people in the street today. And he hears more footsteps coming this direction from far off, and he hears a voice where those footsteps are. Almost as if it's a voice that's teaching along the way. And then someone in Bartimaeus' earshot says the name Jesus of Nazareth. He's heard of this guy. He's heard of this renegade rabbi from Galilee. Some are calling him heretic, but others are calling him Savior. Maybe he's the one. Maybe he's the one who can do for me what no one else can. And as the footsteps get louder and louder and the voice becomes clearer and clearer, Bartimaeus shouts, "Son of David!" Silence. And then a mean voice pops up. "Be quiet. He doesn't want to see you. He doesn't have time for you. Stop talking." But Bartimaeus won't be silenced. He has a need that he needs to be met, and he shouts all the louder, "Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me." And the voice that was approaching then says, "Call him." And the mean voice, now pretending to be nice, says, "All right, get up. All right, he's calling you forward. You got your shot. Go." And Bartimaeus immediately gets up, doesn't even bring his outer garment with him, and he approaches where the voice was coming from. And it arrives. And the voice now right in front of him says, "What do you want me to do for you?" Now, Bartimaeus had some choices here. He could have asked for bread, for water, for clothing. As a person in this time, he was completely dependent on the compassion of others. But he doesn't go to any of that stuff. He goes to the deepest need that he has, and he says, "Teacher, I want to see." And the voice says, "Go, your faith has healed you." And his eyes are open. I want to tell y'all something. This is not a story about positive thinking. It's not a story about manifesting your belief. This is a story about recognizing who Jesus is and recognizing your need of him. You see, Bartimaeus calls him Son of David. That's not just a title like, "Hello, good sir." It's a Messiah title. It's a Messiah phrase dripping with meaning from the prophets. And when he calls him Son of David, he's saying, "I believe you are the promised one. I believe that you can do for me what no one else can do. I'm not asking for bread or a robe. I'm not wanting you to give me anything that this world can offer. My real need is I need to see so I can be whole again." And can you imagine what it must have felt like for someone to have finally granted his request, for someone to have finally saw him? Something about this admission of your deepest need opened him up to God's grace. Asking Jesus to meet our deepest need opens us up to God's grace. As we close out today, I want to invite the band forward. And I want to tell y'all that I can't help but think about James and John in the background of this story and how maybe their eyes start to be opened just like Bartimaeus. They wanted something that would have made them better, but Bartimaeus just wanted to be worthy by God's standards. Bartimaeus was an insignificant man who dared to believe that he was significant to God. And that's why that we can rejoice. Because Bartimaeus believed, he dared to believe that he had God's full, undivided attention. He had faith that God could do for him something that would be lasting and eternal, and it can be that way with us too. Jesus came so that you and I and everyone would know that we are significant to God. That's why he went all the way to die on a cross. That's why we baptize infants before they can choose God, because we believe that the truth is that God chooses you and that God wants to adopt you into his family. What Jesus will not do for you is he won't make you more significant than everyone else. He's not our genie. He's not always going to grant our every wish. Jesus did not come to meet your temporary earthly wants. Jesus came to fulfill the deepest needs of your soul. He wants to heal your heart from what sin has done and transform it into his likeness. He wants to free you from worry, want, and weariness. What he will do for you is that he will fill that God-shaped hole in your heart, and he wants you to see him and to know him and to realize what he came to do for you. So the good news is this, and it's an awesome bit of good news. What Jesus will do for you is redeem you and heal you and transform you when you bring your deepest needs to him. And he'll do that because you are significant to him. And thanks be to God for that.